Hey guys, welcome to another Horror Stories Daily video. What I am doing with this series of videos is conducting a world tour. I am compiling and telling stories from every country on Earth, starting with Afghanistan and ending with Zimbabwe. So without further ado, let's delve into today's horror stories. And remember, the real monsters may be closer than you think. In the heart of Afghanistan, nestled between the jagged peaks of the Hindu Kush, lies a village where my story unfolds. It was the summer of 2009, and I, a 24-year-old man, found myself embedded with a humanitarian group tasked with rebuilding schools devastated by years of conflict. The landscape was as beautiful as it was harsh, a reflection of the nation's tumultuous history. Our base was in a small, remote village in the province of Bamyan, far from the bustling streets of Kabul. The locals, wary yet welcoming, had seen too many foreigners come and go, each leaving their mark on the already scarred land. It was here, amidst the rubble and resilience, that I encountered something that defied explanation, something that has haunted me ever since. We worked closely with the village, and I came to know many of its residents. Among them was an elderly man, Hadi, who often spoke of the ancient spirits that roamed the mountains, remnants of Afghanistan's storied past. He warned of places where the veil between our world and the next was thin, where those who ventured at night seldom returned. I listened with a mix of skepticism and intrigue, attributing his tales to the local folklore that was as rugged as the landscape itself. One evening, after a long day of work, curiosity got the better of me. With the light of the setting sun casting long shadows across the valley, I decided to explore the outskirts of the village, camera in hand, hoping to capture the raw beauty of the place. I wandered further than intended, losing track of time as the light faded. That's when I stumbled upon an ancient, crumbling shrine, half swallowed by the earth, its origins lost to time. The air around it felt charged, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Remembering Hadi's warnings, I hesitated, but the allure of the unknown drew me closer. As I approached, the silence of the evening was shattered by a chilling wail that seemed to emanate from the ground beneath my feet. Frozen in place, I scanned the horizon, but saw no one. The wailing grew louder, a sorrowful cry that spoke of centuries of suffering and loss. Heart pounding, I realized the sound was not of this world. It was as if the very earth was mourning. In that moment, a figure appeared before the shrine, vague and shimmering, barely visible in the twilight. It was a woman, dressed in the traditional attire of a bygone era, her face obscured by the shadows. She seemed to be searching for something, or perhaps waiting. Terrified, I raised my camera, the urge to document this apparition overwhelming my fear. But as soon as I pressed the shutter, the figure vanished, leaving behind a cold gust of wind that whispered secrets I could not understand. Shaken, I hurried back to the village, the darkness closing in around me. When I recounted my experience, Hadi listened intently, nodding as if my tale confirmed something he had long known. He spoke of the woman I had seen, a spirit known to the locals as the mourning bride, a symbol of the unending grief that had befallen Afghanistan. She was a harbinger of caution, a reminder of the cost of forgetting the past. To this day, the photograph I took remains a hauntingly empty frame, a stark reminder of that evening. The experience has stayed with me, a spectral memory etched into my mind. It was a personal encounter with the unseen world that lies just beyond our understanding, a world that, in the heart of Afghanistan, felt all too real. In the sprawling, rugged terrain of Afghanistan, beneath the vast canvas of stars unmarred by city lights, I found myself stationed in a remote forward operating base. It was the fall of 2011, and I was a 26-year-old soldier, part of an international coalition. The harsh beauty of the Afghan landscape was as mesmerizing as it was unforgiving, a constant reminder of the thin line between life and death. Our base was near a small, ancient village in Kandahar province, a place where time seemed to stand still. The villagers were reticent, their eyes holding stories of sorrow and resilience. My interactions with them were limited but profound, offering glimpses into a culture profoundly shaped by centuries of conflict. One night, after a grueling patrol, my unit received reports of unusual activity in a nearby valley, an area believed by locals to be cursed. The valley was known as the Whispering Valley, named for the strange sounds that travelers claimed to hear when passing through at night. Sounds that, as legend had it, were the voices of the dead, unable to find peace in the war-torn soil of Afghanistan. Our mission was to recon the area for any insurgent activity, but what we found there transcended any rational explanation. As we approached the mouth of the valley under the cover of darkness, a palpable sense of unease settled over the unit. The usual sounds of the night felt muted, as if the valley itself was holding its breath. We advanced in formation, night vision goggles illuminating the way, when suddenly a chilling wind swept through the valley, carrying with it whispers in Dari, the local language. The voices seemed to be pleading, crying out in sorrow and anger. I strained to make sense of the words, but they slipped away, leaving only a haunting echo. The atmosphere grew heavier, and then, without warning, our radios crackled to life. Static filled the airwaves for a moment before giving way to a clear, undeniable sound. A heartbeat, slow and steady, as if emanating from the earth itself. The sound was unnerving, impossible, yet there it was, echoing through our equipment. Panic set in as the heartbeat grew louder, more insistent. Our formation broke as we scrambled to identify the source, but there was nothing, no enemy, no explanation for the phenomenon we were experiencing. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the heartbeat ceased, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. We retreated from the valley, the weight of what we had experienced hanging heavy on our shoulders. Back at the base, our debrief was met with skepticism. There was no tangible enemy to confront, no strategic threat to counter, only the lingering fear of something beyond our understanding. In the weeks that followed, the Whispering Valley was avoided. The whispers, the heartbeat, they were never explained. Some called it a psychological operation by the insurgents, others a natural anomaly. But those of us who were there knew the truth. We had encountered something that defied explanation, a manifestation of the land's tortured soul. I left Afghanistan with more questions than answers, carrying with me the haunting memories of that night. The experience has stayed with me, a stark reminder of the unseen scars left by war, not just on the land and its people, but on the very fabric of reality itself. In the late summer of 2013, I found myself in the rugged heart of Afghanistan, serving as a nurse with a humanitarian organization. At 29 years old, I had already seen much of the world's suffering, but nothing had prepared me for the raw, haunting beauty of this land, nor the depth of its scars. Nestled within the shadows of towering mountains, I was stationed in a makeshift clinic in a small village in the Helmand province, a place where the war seemed like an ever-present ghost. The people of the village were kind, but carried a weight in their eyes that spoke of endless grief and loss. They spoke of the war, of loved ones lost, but also of something older, a fear that predated any foreign soldiers or insurgents. They whispered of the shadow of the Kuh-e-Murdar, an entity or curse believed to haunt the nearby mountain, named for the countless who had vanished upon its slopes. One evening, as the sun dipped below the jagged horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, a local elder with deep lines etching his face shared the tale. The shadow was not just a spirit, but a harbinger of misfortune, an echo of all the sorrow the land had absorbed over centuries of invasion, conflict, and bloodshed. They said it preyed on the weary and the lost, ensnaring them in an endless night. Curiosity, perhaps mixed with the arrogance of an outsider, led me to scoff at the legend. Such stories were common in places scarred by conflict, I thought, manifestations of collective trauma. Yet, as the days shortened and the nights grew colder, an unsettling feeling took root within me, a sense of being watched from the mountains. It happened one night in early October. The clinic was quiet, save for the soft moans of the wounded. Sleep eluded me, so I stepped outside for a breath of the crisp night air. The moon was a thin crescent, barely illuminating the barren landscape. That's when I saw it, or thought I did, a figure tall and impossibly thin, standing at the edge of the village where the bare earth met the rocky ascent to the Kuh-e-Murdar. I blinked, and it was gone, but the sense of dread lingered. heavy and oppressive. Over the next few nights, the figure reappeared, always in the corner of my vision, never any closer, its form barely more than a wisp of darkness. I told myself it was the strain, the fatigue, playing tricks on my mind. Then, one night, it moved, not towards me, but parallel, as if leading. Compelled by a force I couldn't resist, I followed. The outskirts of the village gave way to open desert, and then to the rocky base of the mountain. The figure was gone, but the path ahead seemed clear, almost inviting. I don't know how far I climbed, the world around me a blur of shadows and moonlit stone. Time seemed distorted, the silence absolute. It was only when I stumbled, my foot catching on an unseen rock, that the spell broke. I found myself alone, high on the mountain's slope, the village a distant patch of light far below. Panic set in then, cold and sharp. I had no recollection of the climb, no sense of how long I'd been walking. As I descended, the rational part of my mind struggled to take hold, to attribute the night's events to stress, isolation, perhaps even the onset of illness. Yet when I reached the safety of the clinic, the elder was waiting, his expression grave. "You have seen the shadow," he said, not a question, but a statement. He spoke of others who had been lured away, some never to return, others found wandering, days later, hollowed out by an experience they could never articulate. I left Afghanistan not long after, but the memory of that night has never faded. It's a reminder of the invisible scars that conflict leaves on a land and its people, and of the ancient fears that dwell in the heart of every culture, awaiting the moment to remind us of our own fragility. During the chilly autumn of 2014, I found myself in the stark yet mesmerizing terrain of Afghanistan, specifically in a remote area near the border with Pakistan. At that time, I was a 31-year-old female journalist from Canada, venturing into war-torn regions to uncover stories that went beyond the daily headlines, stories of people living in the shadow of perpetual conflict. Afghanistan, with its complex tapestry of beauty and despair, offered just that. My journey led me to a small village in the province of Nuristan, a region famed for its rugged mountains and the fiercely independent nature of its people. The village, clinging to the side of a steep valley, was a collection of mud brick houses that had withstood the test of time and conflict. The villagers, though initially wary, gradually opened up to me, sharing tales of their daily lives, their struggles, and their dreams for peace. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the valley, an elderly woman approached me. Her face was etched with lines that spoke of a life filled with hardship and sorrow. In a mix of broken Dari and gestures, she told me about the Valley of the Whispers, a place considered cursed by the locals. It was said that those who ventured into the valley after sundown were never seen again, swallowed by the shadows. She warned me to steer clear of it, her eyes reflecting a fear that was palpable. Driven by a mix of skepticism and an insatiable curiosity that had always guided my journalistic endeavors, I decided to investigate this Valley of the Whispers. Accompanied by a local guide, Ahmad, a young man who seemed less perturbed by the legends, we set off just before dusk, planning to skirt the edges of the valley and return, before the light completely faded. As we approached, a sense of unease settled over me. The valley, a deep gorge carved by ancient rivers, seemed to absorb the light, casting it into deep shadows. Ahmad, previously talkative, grew silent, his pace quickening. Suddenly, a whisper carried on the wind, so faint I thought I had imagined it. Then, another and another, until the air was filled with a chorus of whispers. They seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere, a cacophony of voices that were neither male nor female, old nor young. Ahmad froze, his face draining of color. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if urging us deeper into the valley. Panic set in, a primal fear that urged me to flee. I turned to Ahmad, but he was gone, vanished as if he had been a figment of my imagination. Alone, with the whispers enveloping me, I ran. I ran until my lungs burned and the village lights were once again in sight. I never found Ahmad. The villagers, upon hearing my story, nodded solemnly, as if this confirmed what they had always known. They spoke no more of it, and I was left with a haunting question. What had happened in the Valley of the Whispers? I left Afghanistan with more stories than I had hoped to find, but it was the mystery of the Valley of the Whispers that lingered, a reminder of the unseen forces that dwell in the shadows of war-torn lands. In the unforgiving landscape of Afghanistan's Logar province, during the harsh winter of 2015, I found myself assigned to a small, isolated forward operating base. At 27 years old, serving as a male communications specialist in the military, I was far from my home in the United States, immersed in a world that was as alien as it was dangerous. The barren, mountainous terrain around us was a constant adversary, but it was not just the physical challenges that we faced. There were stories, whispered in the dark, that spoke of something older, something that the war had awakened. One such story was about the echoes of the fallen, a phenomenon that, according to local folklore, was a manifestation of the souls lost in the endless cycles of violence that had plagued the region. The elders said these echoes were most potent during the winter nights, when the cold bit into the bones and the wind carried the voices of the past. Skeptical, but intrigued, I dismissed these tales as attempts to make sense of the inexplicable horrors of war. However, as the days shortened and the nights grew colder, an unsettling feeling began to take hold. It started with the radios. Every night, at precisely 0300 hours, the static would give way to whispers. At first, we thought it was a glitch or perhaps the enemy trying to psych us out, but the voices were not speaking any language known to us or our interpreters. They were ethereal, a soft murmur that seemed almost mournful. Determined to find a rational explanation, I set up recordings, hoping to catch these anomalies and analyze them. Yet each morning, the recordings would be nothing but static. The whispers refused to be captured. My curiosity turned to obsession, the need to understand, to explain, driving me to the brink of my own sanity. Then, one night, as I manned the communications tent alone, the whispers began again. This time, however, they were louder, clearer. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold outside. The voices seemed to be calling to me, urging me out into the darkness. Against every instinct, I found myself stepping outside, drawn by the need to listen, to understand. The base was silent, the only light coming from the moon above. The whispers grew louder, guiding me away from the safety of the camp and towards the ruins of an ancient structure that lay beyond our perimeter. The air grew colder, the darkness deeper, as I approached the ruins. The whispers were now a cacophony of voices, a lament for centuries of bloodshed and sorrow. And then I saw them. Figures, ethereal and shimmering, moving amongst the ruins. Soldiers, but not of any modern army. Their garb ancient, their faces twisted in expressions of eternal pain. They paid me no heed, lost in their own torment. The realization hit me then, a wave of cold terror. I was witnessing the echoes of the fallen, the souls of those who had died in this land, trapped in an endless cycle of war and despair. I don't know how long I stood there, watching the spectral procession. When I finally returned to the base, the dawn was breaking and the voices were gone. I never spoke of that night, the fear that I would not be believed, that I would be thought mad, silencing me. Yet, the experience changed me, haunting my dreams, a constant reminder of the cost of war, not just in lives but in the souls that are left behind, bound to the land that claimed them. Afghanistan taught me many things, but it was the night I heard the echoes of the fallen that will stay with me forever, a chilling testament to the unseen scars left by centuries of conflict. In the harsh, unforgiving winter of 2016, I found myself stationed in a remote corner of Afghanistan's Panjshir Valley, a place where the mountains seemed to swallow the sky. I was 34 years old, a female photojournalist from Italy, drawn to the region by stories of its rugged beauty and the resilient spirit of its people. What I discovered, however, was something far beyond the scope of my camera lens, a mystery woven into the very fabric of the valley itself. The locals spoke in hushed tones about the guardian of the valley, a presence that had protected the Panjshir for generations. They said it was neither spirit nor man, but something ancient, a force rooted deep within the mountains. Many credited this guardian with the valley's uncanny ability to resist invaders, from the Soviets to the Taliban. I listened to these stories with a skeptical yet open mind, my journalistic curiosity piqued. As the weeks passed, I ventured further into the valley, my camera capturing the stark winter landscape and the faces of those who called it home. The people welcomed me, their hospitality a warm contrast to the cold. Yet whenever I asked about the Guardian, conversations would abruptly end, and I would be met with evasive glances. One clear, cold night, as the stars blazed above, I found myself alone, walking along a narrow path that wound its way up the mountain. I had heard whispers of an ancient shrine dedicated to the Guardian, and driven by a mix of determination and folly, I decided to seek it out. As I climbed, the silence of the valley was palpable, a stillness so profound it felt like another world. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the mountains, a sound so deep and powerful it vibrated in my chest. I stopped, my breath visible in the frigid air, and looked around. There was nothing but the night and the mountains. Then, I saw it. A figure, massive and indistinct, standing atop a nearby ridge. Its form was barely more than a shadow against the starlit sky, but I could feel its gaze upon me, ancient and penetrating. I raised my camera, my fingers numb with cold, and snapped a photo. The shutter sound seemed impossibly loud in the silence. The figure did not move, but the rumble came again, this time accompanied by a voice, or perhaps it was the wind, speaking words I could not understand. The message, however, was clear. I was not welcome. Fear took hold, a primal, overwhelming urge to flee. I turned and ran, stumbling down the path, my heart pounding in my ears. I did not stop until I reached the safety of the village, the lights of the homes like beacons in the darkness. The next day, I developed the photo, my hands shaking as I waited for the image to appear. But there was nothing, only the ridge and the stars, the figure gone as if it had never been. I asked one of the villagers, a man whose family had lived in the Panjshir for generations, about my experience. He listened quietly, then simply said, "You have seen the Guardian. Be thankful it allowed you to leave." I left Afghanistan shortly after, my assignment complete, but the memory of that night has stayed with me. The photo remains a haunting reminder of my encounter, a moment when the veil between myth and reality seemed to vanish. The Guardian of the Valley, whatever it may be, is a testament to the mysteries that linger in this ancient land, secrets not meant for outsiders to uncover. In the spring of 2017, as a 28-year-old male software developer from Germany, I found myself inexplicably drawn to the rugged, war-torn landscapes of Afghanistan. My journey was not one of necessity, but of a personal quest for understanding and connection to a world so vastly different from the technological confines of my daily life. My destination was a small, secluded village in the province of Badakhshan, a place where ancient traditions held fast against the encroachment of the modern world. The village was nestled in a narrow valley, surrounded by towering mountains that seemed to touch the sky. The villagers were cautious but hospitable, their lives a testament to resilience in the face of hardship. As I settled into the rhythm of village life, I became intrigued by tales of the Silent Watchers, mysterious figures said to roam the mountains, guardians of the land's ancient secrets. The villagers spoke of them with a mix of reverence and fear, insisting that they were neither ghosts nor human, but something other. Driven by a mix of skepticism and curiosity, I decided to explore the surrounding mountains, hoping to capture any sign of these so-called Silent Watchers with my camera. I ventured out alone, under the pretense of a hike, my path leading me higher into the rugged terrain. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the valley, I noticed something odd. A series of ancient stone markers, crudely fashioned but deliberately placed, forming a boundary that encircled the entire village. Recalling the villagers' warnings not to venture beyond these markers after dusk, I hesitated. The rational part of my mind dismissed the warnings as superstitious folklore, but a deeper, primal instinct urged caution. Ignoring this, I stepped beyond the boundary, determined to uncover the truth. Almost immediately, the air grew colder. The light dimmed, and an oppressive silence enveloped me. The vibrant sounds of the wilderness faded, leaving only the sound of my own breathing and the crunch of my footsteps on the rocky path. It was as if I had crossed into another realm, one untouched by time or human presence. As darkness fell, I realized my mistake. The path was no longer familiar, and in every direction, the mountains seemed to loom closer, their forms more menacing. It was then that I first saw them, the silent watchers. Figures, tall and indistinct, stood at the edge of my vision, unmoving, their features obscured by the shadows. Whenever I tried to focus on one, it would dissolve into the mist, only to reappear moments later at the periphery of my sight. Panic set in as I tried to retrace my steps, but the landscape had changed, or so it seemed. The stone markers that defined the boundary were nowhere to be found, and with every turn, I felt the watchers closing in, their silent presence a palpable weight on my chest. It was only when I had abandoned all hope of finding my way back that the village lights appeared through the mist, as if by magic. I stumbled towards them, glancing back to see the watchers standing at the boundary, watching as I crossed back into the world of the living. The villagers found me collapsed just beyond the stone markers,